Welcome to Bound by Books. I am one of your hosts, Danielle Bannister, and I am joined today by fellow writer Sherri Hayes, and we're going to be talking about newsletters and whether or not you as an author need one. So welcome, Sherri.
Hey Danielle, how are you today?
I'm doing. It's late in the day for me, so I'm trying to keep my energy going strong with a nice cup of tea.
I was going to say this is nap time.
This is nap time.
This is nap time.
Yes.
Oh. Well, newsletters.
Yes.
Newsletters.
So I wanted to try to start with some transparency because I think that it's important for listeners to know whether or not we ourselves have a newsletter and maybe how long we've had one, if so, and how often you send one out. So we have some sense
Okay.
of where we're coming from when we're talking about newsletters. So
Okay, 'cause I do
what
think
about you?
I do think we vary a little
I think
bit
we
on
do.
this.
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay, so yes, I have a newsletter. I could not tell you how long I've been sending I've had a long time.
Long time. Okay.
At least 5 years, but it could be 8.
Right.
I have no idea.
For a
At
while,
least
at
5
least.
years, for a
Okay.
while.
Yeah.
Let's see, what were the other
And
questions?
how often do you send out a
How
newsletter?
often? I send my newsletter out every Monday.
Every month. So
I
you do a weekly one.
I have a weekly
Wow.
newsletter, yes.
Okay. All right.
And yeah, I just newsletters are great. We'll get into why they're great, but
Yeah.
newsletters are great.
Yeah. I have a
Um,
newsletter too. I think I've had mine probably about the same amount of time. I might have started it when I first started writing, but probably not. I probably
I
didn't.
was gonna say I did not start mine right away.
I
I do know
probably wasn't
that.
smart enough to know that I needed to do that. And I send mine
Um,
out probably, I don't know, 3 times a month, maybe. It's not. It's at least 3 times a month. Sometimes
in
it's
other
more
words,
than
you're
that.
trying to say you're not consistent there,
No,
are
I'm
you?
consistent, but sometimes if it's a release month, there's more.
Um,
So there are
uh,
consistent days that I send it, but if there's a release that's coming, my newsletter gets hit a little harder than normal. But if it's a normal sort of workflow, then no. So I'm
okay.
inconsistently consistent. So when we're talking about newsletters, I'm sure authors have heard this over and over again. You need a newsletter. Sherri, why do you think an author needs a newsletter?
Because really, when it comes down to it, your newsletter subscribers are really the only things that are yours.
What do you
They're
mean by
only
that?
thing because you're the only one that you're the one who owns the rights to send emails to those email addresses. Those people have given you permission to directly contact them. That's the that's the only real true 100% control that you have in, you know, as far as an owner. You control that information. And you can go and take that information to various newsletters, hosting services. You can go wherever and do that. So if for some reason one hosting service doesn't work for you, then you can take that information and you can go to a different hosting service.
And by hosting service, if there are some new authors, we mean things like a MailChimp or a MailerLite or some sort of provider who's going to send those emails
Exactly.
on your behalf. Okay.
Right. And I mean, there are so many.
There's so many.
That's just two of them. There
Yeah,
are
that's just, yeah.
so many
There
out
are.
there.
Yeah.
Which is great. It gives authors a variety of options and price points,
Exactly.
depending on what they want to do and what they want to get out of it. But you do not have that with really anything else. You do not have that with social media. You do not have that um really anywhere else. You don't even really have that with your blog
No.
unless your blog is through your website. I guess the only
Yeah,
other
if you
thing you have is your website. Your website and your email list, but your website is only it can only do so much. It's great at maybe driving traffic, but it doesn't really do a whole lot to sustain readership.
Yeah. It's a good place to put things to live forever. And a
Mhm.
newsletter is more like, let's keep you up to date on what's really happening. And
Right, it's more communication.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's definitely more communication. I mean, how many times have we heard in the author sphere of Facebook taking author accounts down, um, TikTok banning author accounts?
The
I mean,
site going down that day in
yeah.
Facebook when everything went down.
Oh
If
my
you had a
goodness.
release that day and
Yeah,
you
that
were
was horrible.
only relying on social media posts to get the word
Mhm.
out about your release, you you were screwed that day. But if you had a
Yes.
newsletter, you still had a way to reach your readers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, newsletters are just so important for that general fact, and it allows you to build a relationship with your readers. Um, One of the things I think I was taking a class years ago from another author, and she actually sends newsletters out more than I do. She sends them out twice a week, and her thing is that it's it's building that relationship. It's keeping you in the forefront of your reader's mind. Now, granted, she also releases like every 30 days.
So there's a lot she can talk about.
A lot she can talk about. But what I have found is that there's a good number of readers that when you're an author, they're just interested in you. They're interested in your life. They want to get to know you as a person. That's one of the reasons why they are signed up for your newsletter. Because if all you're doing is selling, 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 then it's really kind of a turnoff. I mean, think about it this way. If you think of any person that you know that is an entrepreneur, because let's be honest, that's what you are as an author.
You're a business person, yeah.
You're a business person,
Yeah.
and every time that you see this person, they're constantly trying to sell you on something.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's a multi-level marketing company or if they're, trying to sell you socks. It doesn't matter. If every time you see this person, they're always going, buy this, buy this, buy
Yeah.
this, buy this. It doesn't really
You tune it out. You tune it
you
out, you
start
unsubscribe, you put it in the
right.
delete folder, you mark it as spam because it's annoying. It gets annoying
Yes.
to be sold to all of the time.
Right. So you need to be giving your readers, the people who subscribe to your newsletter, something other than just buy, 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 buy my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are a lot of different ways of doing that. How do you do that, Danielle? I know you had a kind of a new interesting take, and you can tell everybody how that's going.
Well,
What's going with that? Tell our listeners about that and what's going on.
do you mean my short story every month? Or is that yeah.
Yes.
So this is actually an idea from another author that I know who does this. They produce a short story every month, and they actually take those short stories over time and they publish them as a collection. Uh, once they get enough, and so that becomes like another release for them. I'm not sure I'll do that because I'm not sure my readership is really
Hmm.
interested in short story collections. I know this because I have a short story collection and it doesn't sell. But but it works for this this other author that does it. But I thought that might be a really fun idea to kind of reward subscribers. The 15th of every month, the middle of every month, I send out a short story. It's either going to be a sweet story, a sexy story, or a suspenseful story because that's kind of what I write in.
Hmm.
And sometimes I will pull readers. Sometimes it might just be like the start of a story, and I might pull them. I'm like, what do you think? Should this be a suspense or should this be like a rom-com? Because it could go either way depending on, what happens when this
Right.
character opens the door. And so based on their feedback, I might go, okay, we're gonna write a rom-com. Or, so it's something a little, a fun little treat. And it's an excellent writing challenge for me to try to come up with a short story. So it keeps me, my creative juices flowing, and I think that readers are enjoying them. I do notice that my open rates are better on those days, so I'm assuming that that means that they're liking it. So yeah, that's been a fun new treat for me. Um, and I think, were you going to try something like that on your newsletter, or is that going to live on your blog, or you're undecided?
I'm kind of merging the two a little bit. I'm giving my blog followers the opportunity to vote on the picture prompt that I'm going to use for a it's a little bit different than what you're doing. You're doing
Right,
an actual short story.
right.
I'm actually doing a flash fiction, but I'm doing it every week.
Yeah.
So I'm
I
basically
wouldn't do a short
taking
story every week.
no, that's a little much to try to keep on top of everything
Flash
else here.
fiction is manageable, but not
Yes, flash
short
fiction is
story.
manageable.
Oh,
But basically,
for somebody
yeah.
who doesn't know what flash fiction is, could you just define that real quick?
Okay, so flash. I'll kind of back it up and explain how the concept came to be.
Sure.
Um, Several years ago, I was invited to take part in a group of authors, and we did what was called Flash Fiction Fridays. And every week, we were given on Monday, they would post in a Facebook group, in our little Facebook group, the picture of the week. And on Friday, we all posted on our blogs 100 words based on this
Exact?
picture. Had to be exact.
Oh,
100
that's
words.
hard. That's hard.
Not 99,
That's
not
hard.
101. It
That's
had to
hard.
be 100 words.
That's hard.
It was so challenging
Yeah,
but it was awesome because as an author, it really made you be choosy
it
about
really
the words
does.
you were using
Yeah.
because then it's like, oh crap, I'm a little over or I'm a little under. Where can if I'm
It
under, can I
teaches you
add a
economics
descriptive
of
word
words for
here?
sure. Yeah.
Exactly. So, the group kind of fell apart. We, there were some scheduling issues, and
Yeah.
then the creator of the group, he had some personal stuff going in his life. He couldn't do it anymore. So, when he stepped away, it kind of fell apart completely, and so we stopped doing it.
We
But I
should do
really
that as a
loved it.
group, and we should post it to our website. But maybe not weekly. Maybe a maybe a monthly content.
Maybe, maybe. But it's just it was to me, I loved it. It was so much
Yeah.
fun because um it really tested my writing
Yeah.
chops.
It does.
It stretched it
Absolutely.
because of course now the ones I'm doing are gonna be kind of more personal romance based or just introspection based because that's
Sure.
kind of more of what I personally write. But then when you were in this group, I mean, we never knew what kind of pictures
Sure.
we would get. I
Yeah.
mean, we could get this one time we had a picture of a guy in a bowling hat. I mean, just that was it. It was just a guy in a bowling hat and just looking at the camera. We had to do something with it. So, yeah, it was really fun and creative. Like I said, it was stretching the
Yeah.
writing muscles. It's great. So I have taken that concept and every week I post a two pictures on my blog and people can go over there and vote on what picture they want for me to use to do my 100-word flash fiction. And that goes exclusively, it gets posted in my newsletter for my newsletter subscribers. So you can vote in the picture on my blog. Anybody can do that. But if you want this little snippet of story, you got to subscribe to my newsletter.
Right. Right.
So, but it's again because I do a weekly newsletter. I
Yeah.
really um, try to make it fun and do something. I try to share things on my newsletter that I don't share elsewhere, and
Yeah.
that includes personal stuff. There's things I share in my newsletter about my life and things that go on in my life that I do not share anywhere else. I don't post it on social media. I don't share it in my reader group, on my author page, nowhere else.
And
I
that's a good way to build a
exclusively
relationship, so that this is like a friendship. Like, you guys are getting some sort of exclusive insight into,
Mhm.
my life and how I do things, and so that you can build a relationship that way. You
Yeah.
mentioned posting to your blog. Now,
Mhm.
What's the difference, for those who might
Mhm.
not know, between a blog and a newsletter?
Oh,
How would
a
you
blog.
define it? Because they're both
Hmm.
content that
Yeah.
you could post to on a weekly basis. Now, see, for a blog, I post twice a week to my blog.
Mm.
So I blog more than I do newsletters. But for me, the blog is more my personal stuff. That's, I guess, where I put my
Mm.
personal stuff. Um, I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason for why I've done it that way, but that's just the way I've done that. So,
Um, okay,
what do you put in your
so,
blog if you're blogging? How often do you blog?
um, well, my blog is probably a lot less consistent than
Huh.
my things because it's kind of an evolving thing. I've been trying to get my footing on what content I'm putting on my blog.
It's
Recent
hard.
It is because I am, again, though, because I am sending a newsletter out every week. I have a lot of content that goes there, but again, I do not want to have a lot of cross content. I don't want to be posting the same thing on the blog as I am on the newsletter because then why should people subscribe to my newsletter?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but to have content. So what I have taken to doing uh fairly recently, but I've been doing it for about a month now. On Mondays I always post about the podcast with a link to listen to the podcast itself. They can just listen right on my blog. They don't have to go anywhere. They can just click on it.
Yeah.
Then I have taken on Wednesdays. Wednesdays I've chosen to
Hump day.
actually write. Yeah, hump day. I I take whatever topic that we're talking about on the blog on the podcast that we posted on Monday on that Monday, and I actually write a whole blog post about that topic. And um I really try to, sometimes I'll touch on some things that we actually talk about in the podcast, but even on the podcast that I'm in, when you're having a conversation with somebody and then you go home later and you're like, man, I really should have
Should have said
said
this. Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
or I really should have brought up this, information too. And that's kind of where my blog post, ends up. Um, and, I wrote a blog post, about, podcast that you, Danielle, did with Mary Ann about pen names. It was all about pen names. And so I wrote a blog post about pen names and I went into the reasons that people use pen names.
Yeah.
And, the obvious one obviously was that, in the past, women used pen names all the time
Yeah.
to hide their sex
Yeah.
because things. But I also go into the other reasons
Sure.
that, people may use pen names and actually give an example of somebody who
Sure.
used a pen name and why. So I kind of dive a little bit deeper and give him my take on it. But yeah, I'm really having fun with that. I also will talk sometimes um about books I'm reading, which I do sometimes share those in my newsletter. I'll just say what I'm currently reading or what's next on my TBR. I do kind of cross pollinate those things a little bit. But that's just one thing that
Yeah.
I do. But yeah, that's kind of usually what I stick with on my blog. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Since you blog more than I do.
I do. I do. I tend to blog more like personal stuff, personal things that I'm doing or personal challenges or whatnot. Yes, and writing struggles as well. And I'll update people. But my newsletter, I tend to have more like the exclusive content. So, like those short stories are not going to live on my blog. Those short stories will only live on my newsletter. I'll do exclusive giveaways on my newsletter that I'm not going to post on social media or do anything about. So, I'm constantly with every newsletter, I'm trying to give them something of value that might be, useful or helpful or entertaining to them in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
So I am trying to do that with everyone, and I try to, not bombard them with too much information, but try to let them know about, releases that might come up. Because, part of the reason they signed up for the newsletter is because hopefully they like you as an author and they want to know about your
Right.
releases. So there's a, you have to try to do it in a way that you're not always selling, selling, selling. But now here comes the piece for authors who maybe don't have a newsletter. How do they get a newsletter? I mean, we've convinced them that they need a newsletter. But then what do they do? Like, how do they do it? Like, what would you recommend to somebody who is a new author? What would be the first step that you would say, this is what you do first?
Okay, so if you're completely new to newsletters, you have nothing. My First of all, look at who you have your web. Hopefully you have a website. Okay, that's a whole other rabbit hole
Well
that we will go
well,
down.
here's
You
a
need a
here's a
website.
here's a follow-up question. You've just started out. What's more important to get first, the website or the newsletter?
Mm. Well, hmm, honestly, they're both equally
Yeah.
important. You really need to have both of them. And
Yeah.
I mean, because your website is really your, I hate to use that word, but it is your legitimacy as an author.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's the home base where things live. People are gonna Google you. You want them to go to a website, right? You're
right,
not gonna be
right,
able to
yeah,
find your
because
newsletter as easily. You want the website.
right. Well, and the thing is that you can use your website to funnel readers to your
Yep.
newsletter.
Yep.
So it really kind of is a key component in there.
And you can
You really
blog
need to
from your newsletter. So you can do a lot of things. Not from
from
your
your
newsletter,
website,
from
yeah,
your website. You can
from
do
your
a lot of
website,
things from the website. So maybe the
right,
website starts first. So then you
right.
can plug in all the other
But
components.
it needs to be like website newsletter,
Yeah.
boom, boom,
Yeah.
not like website newsletter.
Yeah.
No, it needs to be
Yeah.
boom, boom.
Yeah.
And you need to look at who you're hosting your website with and see what your options are. Do they offer a service that you can maybe get at a discount that gives you the ability to do automation?
Right.
Now, we haven't really talked about automation, and if you're new to newsletters and you've never done one before, you may not have any idea what automation
Automation
is.
can be scary if you don't know how to do it.
It can be, but it is one of those things where you kind of need to, like, when you're doing it, you really need to learn how to do automation. And the reason I say that, and we're not going to get too much into that down that rabbit hole today, but I'll just say this: you really want to try to find a newsletter um, host that is going to allow you to do automation, even if you do not use it right away.
Yeah. And a
You
lot of
want
the free ones now do not offer the automation,
exactly,
which I mean,
exactly.
I suppose if you were just starting out and you have no budget to spend, you can get away with not doing automation until you get a few people on your newsletter, until you get, some of those sales coming in.
Mhm.
You can get away with it, but it's more important, I think, that you
Yeah.
have the newsletter than
Yes.
you have mastered the automation.
Right. Now, yeah, if you have no budget whatsoever, then just go with a MailChimp or a Miller Lite. Get started. However, understand that soon you are going to have to
Yeah.
pay for it somewhere somehow.
Yeah.
And I do think that as far as cost wise, unless you can get something through uh your website host, Mailer Lite is, I believe, the cheapest option right now for newbie authors.
Depends on how it depends on factors and things like that in terms of how
Right, but
many, but look into
right, but
both, but yeah.
just starting out, because I think that, I mean, Mailchimp does allow you to do more subscribers
Right.
for free,
Yep.
but they do
But
not allow you to do any automation
correct.
whatsoever with their
Correct.
free plan. And
Correct.
I think Mailer Lite does, at least the last time I checked, unless they've recently changed that.
That may or may not be true. I haven't looked into that lately. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to look into, but you're going to need to set up a newsletter, and both of those sites will sort of walk you through
Mhm.
what you need to do to create your sign up form, because ultimately you need a
Right.
sign up form, and it'll
Mhm.
provide you a little link, and then that's the link, that sign up form. That's what you're going to start sharing on, your social media, on your website or your blog once you have it, and you're going to start to ask people to sign up for your
In your back
newsletter,
matter.
in your back matter for your books. If you want to get into book funnel, you can really start growing a list fast, but you need that sign up form first.
Yes. Yes.
So that's where you would start. And speaking of book funnel, there's another sort of tool that you can use with book funnel, and even if you're not using book funnel and you wanted to deliver it yourself, if you're starting really slowly and adding one person at a time, is
Mhm.
reader magnets. Now,
Yes.
what would you call a reader magnet for somebody who has never heard this term before? What a reader magnet is?
Oh, okay.
You like how I
So,
turn that on you?
yeah, I
You're
love how that.
welcome.
Okay, so there's two different things that are kind of related but not the same. You've got reader magnets
Mhm.
and you have newsletter magnets.
Yeah,
And they are not necessarily the same thing. They
not
can be
necessarily. They can be.
utilized similarly,
Right.
but they are not the same thing. A reader magnet is something that you give away for free, a
In
story, a
exchange,
theme in exchange for them signing up to your newsletter. Okay? A a a newsletter magnet is also the same thing, but it tends to be a bonus scene or chapter from a book that you have already written that they have to sign up to your newsletter to get. So they're both kind of reader magnets, but not exactly the same.
right.
Because a
And
newsletter magnet should be completely independent. It
yes,
shouldn't have to do with anything with the
right.
book. I mean, you should be able to read. They should be. A reader should be able to read that without having to read any of your other books, and still have a story.
Right.
Still have a complete story, and usually it's a short story.
Hmm.
Like maybe
Yeah.
a prologue to your
The
series
reason it's usually
or
short is because we're giving it away for free.
free.
So we're putting in a lot of work to give this thing
And
away for
money,
free, and
because you
money
got to
because we got
have it
to edit it and the
edited. You got to have
cover.
a cover. Yeah.
So yeah, so they tend to be shorter for that reason. But there are authors, if you've got a huge backlist, who don't have any problem giving away an entire book. Some
Yeah, they
some
may give
people will
away the
give
first
away
in series.
maps of, if you write fantasy, the reader magnet might be a map of it doesn't have to necessarily be a story, but it's something. Could be worksheets if you're writing a nonfiction or whatever. It's something that you're giving in exchange. And I'm sure people have signed up for these things all the time. Get this
Hmm.
free thing, just give me your email. You're signing up
Right.
for a newsletter when you do that. That's what that is. So it's kind of like that. So
Yep.
we talked a little bit about this, but maybe we could touch on a little bit more. Got a newsletter.
Hmm.
We're going. We've got a list. We're sending it out. We've decided we're going to send out a newsletter once a month to start with. We
Okay.
want to set a schedule. We
Okay.
want to set a schedule. We want
Yes.
to set
Consistency.
reader
Consistency.
expectations, right? So
Hmm.
we're sending a newsletter once a month. We are a new author, so maybe we're only releasing one book a year. What are we posting about? If we only got
Oh my
one release
goodness.
a year, what are we posting about the other 11 months?
Well, are you writing during that time? I
You
mean,
would
you
think.
should be talking to your readers and telling them about how your writing's going. If you did some cool research, I mean, if for one of my books, I actually went to the local fire station and got a tour and was able to like climb inside of a fire engine and see all that. Share that.
It could
Share
also
that kind of
be
stuff.
research that you want to know from them. What
Mhm.
types of, characters do you really like? Or they could vote on, maybe you have a couple of character ideas in mind and you're not sure. Should he be a dark haired guy or a blonde haired guy? And you could vote and
Names,
see
character
names,
names.
sure, locations. You could do that.
Mhm.
You could do a giveaway. Maybe you don't have the book out yet, but maybe you have a printed draft copy of what you've worked on and scribbled on. You might think that that's recyclable garbage, but people like that stuff. That's a one of a kind, like,
Mhm.
wow, the author's work in real life, right? Or,
Mhm.
you know, there are lots of
Exactly.
different things that you could talk about. And then, of course, the months leading up to your release, you would probably lean a little bit heavier on that. But
Right.
there's things you can talk about that doesn't always have to be about buy my book.
Yes. Yes. I mean, you can have once you get a buildup of books and backlists and it's not your first one, you
Mhm.
have all that. You can always include a buy link at the bottom of your
Sure,
newsletter, but and you can do that for every newsletter. You can
sure.
always just this is my latest book or this is my upcoming book. Just have those buy links in the
Right.
at the bottom of the
That's like
newsletter.
a little
So
PS. My latest
yeah,
release is available now.
right. But you don't want to have it be like boom, front and center in your face
Right.
all the time. And
Right.
again, I go back to that analogy of the person that you know that sells whatever it is, whatever widget, if you're having a conversation with them and you bring up, "Oh, I'm having, I'm remodeling my kitchen or whatever." You may, then they'd be like, "Oh, well, here's my card if you need anything." That's a lot more approachable, and it's not gonna be as big of a turnoff than if somebody's going, "Oh, you are you? Well, let me tell you about this and over here, and we can just let's set you up with an appointment." And I mean,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
very different. It's the approach.
Yeah.
And again, it's one thing people expect when you have a new release that you're gonna go, "Hey, my book's on pre-order. Hey, new book's coming out in 2 weeks. Hey," they're expecting that at that point because hopefully they're excited about it too. But they don't want to have every single newsletter to be about the same book. And if you're not coming, I mean, if you're coming out with a book every single month, that's a little bit different
Right.
because
You have a
you're
lot
going to
more to talk
have
about.
and you're gonna have a new book. You're not selling them the same thing
Yeah.
every time. You're saying, "Hey, this is out here. Hey, this is
And
coming
that's where
up."
having a website comes in really handy because you could
Mhm,
always put in your PS, my back titles can be found here.
mhm.
And you direct them to, your website that has all of that
Right.
information there and at the
Yeah.
ready for sure.
Now, let's kind of go to newsletter content a little bit
Yeah.
more. Now, I do know that there are some authors that subscribe to the only putting one thing, the single focus
Yeah.
in a newsletter. I am not particularly of that mind. I have a very delineated list of sections in my newsletter,
Yeah.
and I divide it so it's very clear. I have headings so that my readers can literally just go in and like skim through my newsletter and they can go to the section they want very easily and find
Right.
what the information they want because I want my newsletters to be useful
Sure.
to my subscribers. What is your take on that? Are you a single focus author or are you
um,
kind of a
I tend to have like
lay it all out
a
there?
3 point process to my
Okay.
to most of them. I try to one first and foremost give them something of value, whether that is, hey, look, I put this book on sale, grab it before it goes on full price.
Mhm.
Whether it's a giveaway, hey, I wanted to make sure you knew about this giveaway, enter to win. Whether that's the short story, whether it's a charming tale of how I screwed something up, something of value that might be worth them opening up the
Mhm.
email. I try to ask them a question because ultimately a newsletter for me is about a relationship. I'm trying to write a newsletter to one person. I'm trying to write it to a friend, and I'm trying to have a conversation with that one friend. And so I want to ask them a question. And sometimes I'm blessed enough people will answer me, and then I get that communication, and then that's awesome. I love that.
Mhm.
And then sort of my third thing will be whatever it is that I sort of wanted to sort of get as my message, whether that was, I've got a pre-order coming up, or, whatever it is, sort of my soft sale maybe
Right.
lives there. And it
Your
might even
here's
be
my
a simple
business
PS.
card.
Yeah, it might be a simple PS, my latest release is available now. It might not be the full body of the email, but those are the three
Mhm.
things that I try to put
Yeah.
into to every newsletter.
Yeah, I was gonna say the only time I ever put out a single focus email is on release day.
Release date makes
That's
sense.
it. That's
Release, like the right around, right before, like a pre-order push, the release day, and maybe the one right after will be heavily focused on that. But then it
yeah, like
it peters out.
yeah, like right now, my newsletter, I have a release coming up on April 12th. And so my newsletter for the last month has been like totally focused on this new release
Okay.
because I had we have the pre-order, and
You have
then
the Goodreads
yeah,
giveaway.
I'm doing a paperback
Yeah.
giveaway on Goodreads. I had where my readers could sign up to get the first 6 chapters emailed to them early. So I have all of this stuff going on, and so it's like okay, here. But again, that I guess that's kind of one of the other reasons why I have chosen to do a weekly newsletter, because I found that when I was trying to do it monthly, I was having to put so much information in that
Yeah.
one newsletter, and I'm
It
like,
ended up
this
being,
is overwhelming.
a big CVS receipt of content, and that's too much. Nobody has
Oh,
time to read that much
mm-mm.
content. So you do have to be
No.
economical in your newsletters as well. You don't want them to be a novel. People are reading these as they're scrolling in between meetings, as they're hitting the bathroom. They're not going to be
Mhm.
sitting down for a long time to read these. So
Right,
you have to sort of keep them short and sweet, but also a
right.
value.
Which is another reason why I think that if you're not going to go with the single focus philosophy and you're going to do multiple sections, those sections really need to be well marked so that, again, think of how you as a person, not as the author, but as a average consumer, because let's be
Yeah.
honest, we've all subscribed to something.
Yes.
Some email
Yes.
list we have subscribed to something, whether it
Yes.
is a big retailer or an Etsy store's
Yep.
website, it doesn't matter. You should subscribe to
Yep.
something if you're on
Yep.
the internet for any length of time. Think about those emails. Most likely you open if you open the email, you open it, and the first thing you do is you scan it.
Yeah.
You just do a quick scan to see if there's anything in there that catches your eye that you want to read more about. And then you go and you read what caught your eye and what you
Yeah.
see. And if that was really good, you may rescan the other stuff
Yeah.
and look to see, read through that to see if there's anything you missed. So approach your newsletter the same way.
Yeah.
Make sure that you do have kind of highlights, bullet points, some bold in there that
And
are is
careful
going
of
to
too
the
many
section.
graphics, because
Mhm.
sometimes people's downloads, if you put in too many graphics, it's just going to take forever to load, and they're going to get grumpy with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I try not to get too big on like the graphics I put in there. I try not to put high resolution graphics in there. They should use JPEGs and not high resolution stuff, because
Yeah.
again, otherwise it's going to take so long to load and people are going to get frustrated and they're
Yeah.
going to move on, and you don't
Yeah.
want them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just don't want them to do that.
Whoa, I think we've
So,
covered the gamut of
we've covered a lot.
newsletters. Yeah.
We have covered a lot today. Hopefully that this helped you if you um, really didn't know where to do with your newsletter, or you're new to newsletters. Maybe give you some place to start. Um, But do you have anything else to add today,
I
Danielle?
think that does it for us. But if they have questions or comments, they can
Yes.
always drop it down, and we'll answer them.
Yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, drop your question or comment in the comments section. We do check that, so make sure that you tune in next Monday at noon Eastern time to see what the topic is. Till
We'll
then,
see you
bye.
later.
Wait! Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on our website, boundbybookspodcast.com.